Soaked in rain, her car stalled, her leg bleeding. She stood invisible in the middle of the city as strangers rushed past. Then a man she didn't know knelt in front of her, ignoring the storm and his own urgency. "You need to sit down," he said, steady as if he'd done this 100 times before. She couldn't shake the thought. Why would anyone risk so much for her? The storm had turned the city into a blur of steel and water. Rain fell in sheets, hammering the pavement, overflowing gutters, and drumming against umbrellas that hurried past. Jacob Wells pressed forward through the downpour, his backpack clinging to his shoulders, his shirt plastered to his back. Each step splashed into puddles that had merged into shallow rivers along the curb. The resume he had guarded for weeks, printed on thick ivory paper, was tucked carefully inside a folder, yet he still feared the water might seep in and ruin his one chance at a better future. His eyes were fixed on the crosswalk light when movement caught his attention. A red convertible sat skewed against the flooded curb, hazard lights flashing like beacons in the storm. The driver's door was open, and a woman in an orange gown struggled to steady herself. One heel broken, her legs scraped and muddy. The gown, elegant, expensive, was utterly out of place here, soaked and clinging to her frame. For a moment, Jacob thought she might be one of those untouchable people he only ever saw from a distance. Wealth radiated from her posture, even when she was stumbling. Then he saw the blood. A gash streaked down her shin, mixed with dirt and tiny shards of glass. She tried to wave herself off, brushing at the hem of her gown as if the injury were a trivial inconvenience. But her face betrayed the truth. She was in pain, trying desperately to hide it. And the crowd, dozens of people rushing with umbrellas, barely spared her a glance. Jacob stopped. His chest tightened with the old familiar tug, the choice between responsibility and instinct. The interview loomed in his mind, that single appointment he had pinned months of preparation and hope upon. Stratus Corporation was the opportunity of a lifetime, a door that might finally open to give his daughter the future she deserved. He checked the time on his cheap watch. Minutes left, if that. Every instinct screamed go, but the woman staggered again, gripping the side of her ruined car for balance. Hey, careful," Jacob said, stepping off the curb. The rain soaked his hair, streaming down his forehead, but he barely noticed. He knelt in front of her without hesitation, one hand steadying her arm, the other already inspecting the cut. "You're bleeding," he murmured. Her chin lifted quickly, eyes flashing with a mix of pride and embarrassment. "It's fine," she said, voice clipped. The word was too quick, too sharp, as if she could will it into truth. She held the snapped heel in her hand like a stubborn trophy, refusing to let weakness show. Jacob shook his head. He had seen cuts like this before, working odd jobs, raising a child alone, patching up skin knees with nothing but napkins and calm words. This one wasn't fine. "There's glass in it," he said quietly. "You need to sit down before it gets worse." Her gaze flicked over him, and in that brief second Jacob felt the weight of her scrutiny. She noticed his soaked shirt, his cheap watch, the edges of the resume peeking from his backpack. Her brows knit together slightly, as if piecing him together. "You're in a hurry," she said. It wasn't a question. "Interview," he admitted, jaw tightening. "Then go," she replied, almost commanding. Even though her knuckles whitened as she clung to the car door, even though her legs trembled slightly, she tried to dismiss him as if she didn't deserve the help. Jacob exhaled slowly, pushing the conflict down inside him. Every second counted. He could still make it if he ran. But he heard his daughter's voice echo in memory, her bedtime questions about right and wrong, about why people sometimes ignored those in need. He had always told her, "Do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when no one else does." He couldn't run now, not with her watching from somewhere inside his conscience. "You're hurt," he said again, firmer this time. "Come on. There's a cafe across the street. We'll dry off, clean it up." For a moment, she looked at him as if trying to decide whether he was foolish or extraordinary. Her lips parted, a protest on the edge, but it never came. Instead, she allowed him to offer his arm. Her weight leaned against him, subtle but undeniable. They crossed the street together through the torrent, two strangers bound by a moment neither had expected. Around them, the city carried on, umbrellas darting, cars honking, lives rushing past. But in that small space of rain and silence, Jacob had already made the choice that would change everything. The cafe was a refuge of warm lights and the hum of voices, a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. Windows streaked with rain blurred the city beyond, while the smell of coffee and baked bread hung heavy in the air. Jacob guided the woman carefully to a corner table, easing her into a chair. She lowered herself gingerly, keeping her injured leg extended. The orange fabric of her gown, once commanding, now clung damply, the hem muddy from the street. For the first time, she looked less like an untouchable figure of wealth and more like someone unexpectedly human, wounded, tired, exposed. Jacob hurried to the counter, speaking quickly to the barista. First aid kit? Napkins? Anything you've got. He returned moments later with a small box, a stack of napkins, and a steaming cup of water. Setting everything down, he crouched in front of her, ignoring the curious glances from other patrons. This might sting, he said, soaking a napkin and dabbing gently at the cut. Rainwater mixed with blood, forming thin pink rivulets that ran down his fingers. She winced, her hand tightening around the edge of the chair, but she didn't pull away. You're missing something important, she said suddenly, her voice low, searching. Jacob glanced up, confused. What do you mean? Her eyes flicked to the resume, peeking out of his backpack, to the tension in his jaw. I can tell. You're supposed to be somewhere else right now. He gave a faint smile, though it felt heavy on his lips. Yeah, interview of a lifetime. Director role at Stratus Corporation, been prepping for months. Her brows lifted slightly, eyes narrowing with a sharper edge. And you just skipped it? She let the question hang, incredulous. To help me. Jacob kept his focus on the wound, wrapping a clean bandage around her shin with careful hands. You looked like you needed someone, he said simply. My daughter's 6. I always tell her to do the right thing, even when it's not convenient. Can't really teach her that if I don't live it myself. For the first time, her posture softened. The tension in her shoulders eased, and something almost vulnerable passed over her expression. You're a single dad? Yeah. His throat tightened at the words, but he steadied it. Been raising her alone since she was 2. She's the reason I even applied for the job. I want to give her a better life. Something solid. Something I can be proud to pass on to her. The woman sat silently, her gaze fixed on him as if she were weighing each word, each choice. Around them, the cafe carried on, espresso machines steaming, conversations humming, but Jacob felt the air narrow until only her eyes held him. Most people wouldn't have stopped, she said finally. Her voice was quieter now, almost thoughtful. Most people didn't, Jacob replied, glancing briefly toward the window where umbrellas still darted by. He pressed the final edge of the bandage down firmly. That doesn't mean I shouldn't. Her gaze dropped to her leg, now wrapped neatly, then lifted back to him. For the first time since the street, she smiled, small, reluctant, but real. Thank you. Jacob leaned back on his heels, exhaling slowly. His shirt clung to him, rain still dripping from his hair, but a strange calm settled over him. He knew the interview was gone. The door he had fought so hard to reach now firmly shut. And yet, sitting across from this woman who had been invisible to everyone else, he felt something steady inside him, like he had chosen correctly, no matter the cost. When they stepped back outside, the storm had softened from a roar to a steady hiss, as if the city were finally taking a breath. The street shone like dark glass, neon signs smearing across the puddles in long, quivering streaks. Jacob tilted his head to gauge the rain, then lifted his umbrella and angled it so that more of the canopy covered her than him. Droplets clicked against the fabric, a quiet percussion over the distant horns and the slosh of passing tires. Lean on me, he said, the words simple and unadorned. She did, just enough to keep her weight off the bandaged leg, the orange gown whispering at her ankles. The red convertible still waited at the curb, hazards pulsing, on, off, on, like a heartbeat that had found an odd rhythm and refused to settle. He raised his free hand and whistled once, sharp and clean. A cab eased its way through the lanes and pulled up, brakes hissing. Jacob moved first, testing the curb, then turned back to help her. The broken heel was still in her hand. She regarded it for a beat with a rueful exhale, the kind people give when something small has caused more damage than it had any right to. I can take it from here, she said, voice composed. almost formal again. "I know," he answered, and his tone made it clear that he would still see it through. He steadied the cab door, shifted the umbrella to keep her dry, and offered his arm. She accepted without ceremony, one hand briefly clasping his forearm. Firm, self-possessed, grateful in a way that didn't require embellishment. Once she was seated, the cab's interior lights framed her face in a warm rectangle. Even damp and wind-tossed, she held herself with a quiet authority, like someone used to steering things that mattered. But the authority did not erase the human moment they'd shared. The bandage, the cafe napkins, the silence between instincts and choices. "Before you go," she said, and the words halted him just as he was about to close the door. "What's your name?" "Jacob Wells." She repeated it softly, as if testing the balance of the syllables. Then she looked up and met his eyes with an intent that felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. "I won't forget that." Something in the certainty of her tone surprised him. Not a promise, not quite, just an assurance that the moment had registered somewhere that counted. He gave a small nod, the kind that acknowledges both gratitude and an ending. He shifted the umbrella, leaned in, and told the driver the nearest service garage that stayed open in bad weather. It was habit, really, solving one more piece of the day before it scattered. The driver nodded, the meter blinked to life, and Jacob stepped back. For the first time, he realized the rain had slipped past his collar and soaked down his back. He felt the shiver only when he lifted the umbrella and the night air found him. "Thank you," she said again, this time with no distance in it. "You're welcome." He offered the umbrella, an instinct he couldn't help. She hesitated, then accepted, fingers brushing his for a brief, cool second. The door closed with a softened thump. The cab eased away from the curb, taillights glowing red in the wet, the umbrella's dark dome a small planet moving with it. Jacob watched until the car folded into traffic and vanished behind a bus, until the hazard lights of the abandoned convertible were the only red left blinking on the block. Quiet settled around him. The city was never still, but there are kinds of quiet that exist even in the noise, the quiet of a choice made, of a cost counted. He checked his watch, late enough that late no longer mattered. The interview was gone. He pictured the conference room he'd memorized from photos online. The glass table, the three executives, the list of questions he had rehearsed until they felt like lines from a play. He had imagined shaking hands, imagined calling his daughter after with the kind of steady certainty she could hear through the phone. He drew a breath. The certainty he felt now was of a different sort, and it surprised him with its calm. His chest didn't ache with regret. It felt steadied by the knowledge that the man he told his daughter to be, that was the man who had shown up. Integrity didn't clear the clouds or put dry clothes on his back, but it arranged his thoughts in a way that made the rain feel less cold. He turned toward the cafe door to return the unused gauze and the little tin of ointment, then paused, hand on the handle. Through the fogged glass, he could see the barista wiping down the counter. The corner table where she had sat now empty except for a faint crescent of water darkening the wood. The imprint of the moment, nothing more. On the sidewalk, he took one last look at the stalled car, then pulled his phone from his pocket. A few missed calls from an unknown number. A calendar reminder that had already expired. He silenced the screen and slipped it away again. The city exhaled with him. He straightened his shoulders, rolled his sleeves once, and began to walk. Not hurried, not dragging, just moving forward through the softened rain, the way people do when they have chosen their path and accepted the weather that comes with it. He didn't name it as hope. He didn't dare. But as he reached the end of the block, he realized he was standing a little taller than when the storm had started. Some losses made room, he thought, though he could not yet see for what. And then he went on. 3 days is a small measure on a calendar and a long one in the mind. Jacob moved through them quietly, the way a person crosses a stream on slick stones, careful, balanced, pretending the current doesn't pull. The resume that had once felt like a key now looked like a relic, the paper slightly warped at the corners from the storm. He left it on the kitchen table and stopped himself, twice, from smoothing it flat, as if neatness could undo time. Mornings began the same way. Oatmeal, a cartoon voice drifting from the living room, small shoes thudding across the hallway tile. He braided hair with clumsy fingers that had learned their tenderness by necessity, not by talent. He packed a lunch, listened to a 6-year-old's plans for recess, and made the laugh come easily, Because children are barometers, and he refused to be a low-pressure system. Then came the quiet hours, the ones after drop-off, when he folded into a chair and let the room settle. He clicked through job boards, scanned listings he had already memorized, and opened an email draft to Stratus Corporation that he never sent. "Thank you for the opportunity. I apologize for missing the interview." He typed the words and watched them dull on the screen, each one true and insufficient. He closed the laptop and set it aside, the lid shutting with a small, decisive sound. He told himself that integrity was not a currency. It did not buy time back or open doors out of pity. He believed that, and still some smaller, less disciplined part of him wanted the universe to have a ledger, an entry labeled "did the right thing" when it hurt that might balance something somewhere. He did not call it hope. He called it discipline, and he kept moving. On the third afternoon, the apartment felt warmer than usual, sunlight pooling across the floorboards in quiet rectangles. He stood at the sink and washed 2 mugs that did not need washing. The phone on the counter buzzed once, a small mechanical sound that somehow cut the air cleaner than the hum of the refrigerator. Unknown number. He stared at it, the way a person looks at a closed door and senses someone on the other side. He let it ring once more, then answered. "Hello, this is Jacob Wells." A woman's voice, measured and direct. "Mr. Wells, this is Victoria Langford, CEO of Stratus Corporation." For a heartbeat, the room pressed closer, the walls, the light, the faint tick of the kitchen clock. The name landed with a weight he felt in his chest and behind his eyes, the way a sudden truth reframes the ordinary. He swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. You were scheduled for an interview last week," she continued, every syllable precise. "You didn't show." He closed his eyes for a brief second that felt longer than it was. The words he had typed and deleted returned with clarity he now envied. "That's right," he said softly. "I'm sorry." He steadied his voice. "I was helping someone." He waited for the rustle of impatience, for a professional farewell, for the small click that ends things. Instead, there was a quiet inside the line, a deliberate space, like someone choosing their next step in full view of the drop. He stood straighter without meaning to. The sunlight on the counter had shifted and brightened. A thin stripe of it reached his knuckles where his hand rested near the phone. He did not move it. He did not say more. He understood that explanations, however honest, can overrun the truth they're meant to defend. The voice returned, the tone unchanged but carrying something he could not name yet. "Mr. Wells," she said. "Yes. Let me tell you what I know." He braced, not for judgment, exactly, but for the professional coolness that usually follows it. He thought of the conference room he had never entered, the questions he had rehearsed and would never answer, the year of late nights when he studied while a child slept down the hall. He thought of rain on a city street, of a bandage wrapped cleanly, of a cab door held open because that was simply what you did. He thought of the quiet after the cab pulled away, when the world did not reward him and he did not demand it. "I'm listening," he said, and meant it. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped and stopped. In the pause before the next sentence, he felt the whole weak balance on the thin edge of the moment. Neither loss nor rescue yet, just a line across water, one foot waiting to find the next stone. The line held steady, her breath almost inaudible, before she spoke again. "That someone," she said, measured and deliberate, "was me." The words pressed into him like a tide rising too quickly. Jacob gripped the counter edge, unsure if he had heard correctly. His mind replayed the storm, the stalled convertible, the orange gown, the wound he had wrapped with café napkins. He had spoken to her as if she were anyone, as if the world hadn't stopped to label her important. He had walked her to a cab, offered her his umbrella, and sent her away without asking for a single thing. Silence stretched. "I didn't tell you who I was," she continued, her voice steady, though softer now. "Because in that moment, it didn't matter. I was stranded, hurt, and invisible. And you," she paused, as if searching for the exact shape of what she wanted to say, "you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask my name, or what I could offer you, or if helping me was convenient. You sacrificed something big for someone you didn't know. That told me everything I needed to know about your character." Jacob pressed a palm to his forehead, fingers trembling against his temple. Relief, disbelief, and something heavier all collided inside him. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she replied quickly, without ceremony. The position's yours, if you'll still take it. No interview. You've already passed it. For a second, Jacob forgot to breathe. He had imagined this moment differently. Him in a pressed suit, rehearsed answers, shaking hands across a glass conference table. Now, in jeans still faintly stained with rain, in an apartment too small for dreams of grandeur, he stood holding a phone that had just rewritten the week. He lowered his head, voice rough. Thank you. Truly. I thank you. Don't thank me. Victoria said, firm now. Thank yourself. Most people would have kept walking. Most people did. You stopped. That's what leadership is. Her words cut clean through the static of doubt he had carried for years. Leadership, a word he had never quite claimed, though he had lived it daily, in bedtime stories, in braiding small hair with clumsy hands, in choosing bills over wants, in carrying more weight than one man should, quietly. I'll have my office send you the details, she continued. Salary, benefits, onboarding. But let me say this personally, Mr. Wells, Stratus doesn't just need skill. It needs people who know the value of character when it costs something. You've shown me that. Jacob's throat tightened. He blinked hard, once, then again. I won't let you down. I know, she said simply. There was the sound of a paper being set aside, a faint tap that suggested she was already moving to the next task, but the conviction in her tone lingered. Welcome aboard, Mr. Wells. The line clicked, the call ended. Jacob lowered the phone slowly, setting it on the counter as though it might break under sudden weight. He pressed both hands flat on the cool surface, head bent. For the first time in days, the ache of regret that had shadowed him since the rain dissolved. In its place was a steady warmth. Not triumph. Not yet, but the deep calm of being seen exactly as you were and being told that was enough. The apartment seemed to expand around him. The same walls, the same dishes stacked drying near the sink, but lighter somehow, as if the air itself had shifted. He exhaled, a long sound that left him quieter inside than he had been in years. Some choices cost everything, he thought, and some reveal that what you feared losing was never the true prize. The afternoon light had already thinned by the time Jacob pulled to the curb outside the school. The low sun laid warm bars across the sidewalk, and the air held that end-of-day hush when laughter and footsteps are fading into car doors and quiet engines. He stood beside the passenger door and waited the way he always did, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed on purpose so his daughter would find calm the moment she saw him. Then she did, small backpack bouncing, hair a little messy from play, the sprint turning to a leap as she threw herself into his arms. He caught her easily, breathing in the familiar, sun-in-chalk smell of her hair. It steadied him more than any meeting ever could. Did you get the job, Daddy? She asked, eyes wide with serious hope, the kind that believes the world is both big and fair. He let the answer live on his face before it reached his voice. Yeah, sweetheart, he said, the words gentle and full. I did. She pulled back, searching his expression as if to confirm it was real, then grinned so hard her cheeks dimpled. Did they like your suit? A laugh rose in him, quiet, grateful. I think they like my choices more. He buckled her in, slid into the driver's seat, and for a moment they just sat with the engine off, the car warm from the sun. She swung her feet, humming to herself, already moving on to the important topics of a 6-year-old. A drawing she wanted to finish, a question about whether clouds had edges if you got close enough, a reminder that it was his turn to pick the bedtime story. He listened, adding small answers that kept the conversation stitched tight. The big news did not have to crowd out the shape of their ordinary. It could live inside it. At home, he set the letter from Stratus, already emailed and printed, beside the old resume on the kitchen table. The contrast was not lost on him. One paper heavy with preparation, the other light with unexpected grace. He did not frame either. He did not need to. He boiled pasta, let her stir the sauce from a safe distance, and watched her concentration, the small tongue peeking out at the corner of her mouth, the tiny furrow of her brow, as if the future were arriving on a wooden spoon. During dinner, she circled back. So, how did they know you're good? He twirled a fork thoughtfully. Sometimes people see who you are when you don't think anyone's looking. He met her eyes. Remember what we talk about? Doing the right thing even when it's not easy. She nodded, solemn. Like when you gave my umbrella to that lady last winter. Like that, he said, surprised and moved that she had kept such a small moment filed under important. He set the fork down. The job is good, honey. It'll help us. But what I'm proud of is the reason behind it. What reason? That we helped someone who needed it, he said simply, even when it meant risking something we wanted. She considered this, then leaned across the table, conspiratorial. Did you tell them I'm 6? He smiled. I did not. You should, she said matter of fact. Then they'll know you're extra good. He laughed, a sound that loosened the last tight thread in his chest. I'll keep that in mind. The evening settled into its usual rhythm. Dishes rinsed and stacked, a small bath with bubbles that always ended up on the floor, pajamas chosen after serious debate. At the bookshelf, she ran a hand along the spines, weighing choices as if the right story might decide tomorrow. She picked one with a quiet hero, the kind who pays attention and fixes what he can. Halfway through, she shifted, head pillowed on his shoulder. Are we rich now? She asked, not with greed but with an earnest desire to understand the new map. He kissed her hair. We're okay, he said. Better than okay. Rich is different. Rich is when we keep being kind, no matter what changes. She mulled that over, then nodded against his shirt. Then we're rich. When the story ended, he closed the book but didn't move. The room was dim except for the small lamp that always made the walls feel closer, safer. He traced slow circles on her back, and in the quiet he let himself replay the week. The rain, the choice, the call. He thought of the words that had reached through the line and named something he had only ever practiced without naming. Leadership. He did not rehearse how to deserve it. He decided to keep doing what had led him there, showing up, telling the truth, choosing the person in front of him. Daddy, she murmured, almost asleep. Will you still take me to the park on Saturday? Every Saturday that I can, he said. And when I can't, I'll tell you why. Okay, she whispered, already drifting. Because we do the right thing. He stayed until her breathing grew even. When he finally stood, he clicked off the lamp and paused at the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the soft dark. In the living room, he picked up the printed offer again. The numbers mattered, the title mattered, the stability mattered in ways his younger self could not have imagined. But what steadied him most was not the promise of a salary. It was the sequence of ordinary choices that had led to an unforeseen door opening, not because he had demanded it, but because he had kept faith with the person he wanted his daughter to see. He slid the offer back into the envelope and placed it beside the resume, palm resting on both for a breath. He didn't rush. Then he turned off the kitchen light and let the apartment hold its quiet. Some moments test your character, he thought as he stood in the dark, listening to the small sounds of a child sleeping. Others reveal it. And sometimes, when you think you've lost everything, you've already won more than you know. He looked once more toward her room, then toward tomorrow, clear-eyed, grateful, and ready.